anytime I've ever started at a job, the first thing I've ever done is gone to my HR person to let them know that I do have Tourette's. So by design, if you're going to go by a personality profile test, you need to go with someone that has a high risk of getting in a little bit of trouble once in a while.
Literally. Mm-hmm.
You could go the safe way, but they just wouldn't produce.
They wouldn't produce. He decided to just take his shirt off and send a picture of the shirt.
Sexual harassment would never be reported, but only rated.
He would follow her and he would close the door behind him. This guy's literally using company email to send me this kind of stuff. She went fatal attraction on this guy.
Like 5 jobs, sexual harassment claim in a row.
This guy is now sitting on death row.
The one who buried him under the cement?
Jeff Stearns, connected through cars. If they're bigwigs, we'll have them on the show. And yes, we'll talk about cars and everything else. Here he is now, Jeff Stearns.
Jeff Stearns, connected through cars, here with Marcia Kozera of Lighthouse HR. I want to give you a little bit of Marcia's background. Marcia is a contract and outsource HR person for businesses that don't have an in-house HR department, as well as a consultant for HR departments. Do I have it right so far?
Absolutely.
The name of her company is Lighthouse HR, right?
Right.
Okay. I just cannot believe how terrific Marcia looks, because she's been in the business 20 years, 15 of those years in the car business. And I want you to know, Marcia, that my hair was totally gray by age 30 in the car business. So that's why, and I've seen many guys that I promoted into management and gals that usually within a short term, the hair starts turning gray. So really, you've survived the car business.
That might be because I was in the admin area, so I didn't have to work weekends, and I could go home after 9-hour days, and that was fine. So I do feel for you guys, because it's a crazy business.
Well, and you know what? And also maybe, even though it was your job to protect the dealer's assets, in HR, potential lawsuits, whatever. And I know that yet I could just tell from talking to you that you treated everything as if it was your own, but you weren't necessarily attached to the financial outcome. So who knows? Maybe that.
They always said that HR was a non-producing department, which always made me a little mad, but that's fine.
Oh, no, let's be clear. You are non-productive because you're not selling a car or an oil change. Okay.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
But that's just on the financial statement in the car business. We have fixed, we have variable, we have productive, non-productive. That there is nothing personal about that. Now, also, we need to clearly state again that anytime I've ever started at a job, the first thing I've ever done is gone to my HR person to let them know that I do have Tourette's.
I had a sales manager that would come to my office and he would say, "Can I say anything here?"
Absolutely. Please, God, it might get us some ratings if you say.
He would come to my office and he would say, "Now this one's for you gotta be shitting me drawer," because there was just things that you would think there's no way. And I'm going to tell you though, there's always a story in the car business that just surpasses the next one. Yeah, those were fun years.
Now you've done HR and certainly have contacts with other HR people outside of the car business. Now, my only context is the car business. I've been in the car business since mid to late teenager. So I've done other side consulting and have owned other businesses, et cetera, but never been immersed like the car business with all the staff. I think the car business, maybe along with aluminum siding businesses in the mid 60s, is kind of got to be the richest with stories for people like you. Is that something I'm creating in my mind? Or if we went and ran a pizza place, it would be the same?
Oh my goodness, no. And actually, I laugh because I tell my people, every single HR person that I know is just so like black and white, and there's just the things that they have to deal with are so outrageous. And I'm like, you guys have not been in the car business. Like, you don't know. It's pretty crazy. And so, I always joke and I say that my HR moral compass kind of like got a little, instead of black and white, it went kind of a little gray, because you have to learn to work with the dealer. You have to learn to work with the sales managers, with, service. Everything is so different. Everybody is so completely different. I was just talking to somebody when we were using predictive assessments to pick our star performers. And when you want to pick a star performer, you are looking for a specific personality type. And you know what that personality type is like. That personality type needs to be an extrovert. He needs to be a charmer. He needs to also have his own personal agenda, almost like a little bit sociopathic, because these people need to be able to, go out there and make the sale. And it is what do you call it? An ego booster, kind of thing. So that these people are just amazing at making connections, amazing at letting you hear what telling you what you want to hear, amazing at just like all this gift of gab. And they are probably horrific at paperwork. And so the accounting department is always fighting with them and hating them. This happens all the time. It didn't matter what dealership you worked at. You always had, the accounting department chasing after them because, they couldn't get their paperwork filled out, but they were selling cars, So yeah, it's pretty crazy.
So by design, if you're going to go by a personality profile test, you need to go with someone that has a high risk of getting in a little bit of trouble once in a while.
Literally. Mm-hmm.
You could go the safe way, but they just wouldn't produce.
They wouldn't produce. And that's exactly, you're absolutely right. Flirty, charming, all this stuff. And this is a brand new story that we didn't hear in the last 20 minutes. This one was an actual sales manager. Maybe he was a GSM actually. And this was a person that was like, he was good looking and he knew it. And he just had this like persona about him, and he carried himself the right way. He knew what to say. He was just a great guy. And how does your common sense leave you? I have no idea. But this guy, started texting with a client, and after the purchase was done, after everything was, completed, and, things are okay until they're not okay. We had talked about that before. And the difficult thing is that you may think they're okay all the time, but the other person is the one that all of a sudden is not okay anymore. It's never about intention. It's always about perception. So this guy probably never meant to do any of it, but the text messages started getting a little bit, like.
So this is a manager or a general sales manager and a customer?
Yes, a customer. And so they were flirty, and they got more flirty, and she seemed to be okay with it. And next thing, he decided to just take his shirt off and send a picture of the shirt. At least, it was a shirt. At least that was it. But she didn't like that anymore. Then she was like, now we crossed the line. But when do you know that you're crossing the line unless they tell you that you're crossing the line? And by the time you cross the line, it's too late. It's done.
I think about HR liability where sexual harassment or hostile work environment or whatever, or ethnic this, and making it so something about work environment and then causing a liability that the dealer or an owner or a business owner may need to write a check for. Does that liability exist when it's customer and employee?
Absolutely.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like sexual harassment from a customer? That's the same liability as in the workplace?
Well, no. Okay, so let's answer that question. No. So in this particular case, she could have gotten after him directly, civilly. She could have gone, after him directly for that. She complained to the company, and the dealership actually fired him because it was like, the thread of text messages was sent, copied, everything was sent over. So there was like, come on, that was just poor judgment. So no. So that would not have been through the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission means. That would not have been that way. So as an employee, then you would then go to EEOC, file a claim for sexual harassment, and then it goes that way. And then the company has to, investigate, find out if it's founded, unfounded, and then most likely 9 times out of 10, you have to just settle, just to make it go away.
Publicity, yeah, right. It's just the pain. Like, wow, a manager sending shirtless photos. I may have done something like that, except I knew that would end all flirting if someone saw me with my shirt off, but that's for a different show.
When I first got to Florida and I bought my first car, I did my whole process, bought my car, everything was fine. And oh my gosh, 3 days after, my salesperson would not stop calling me, calling, and wanting to go out. And I was really freaked out because I was here by myself. I just got here. It was, 2001, and I was by myself. And so it was a little creepy because he knew where I lived. He had my address. He had all my information, that guy.
Right. Well, right. Of course. Now, before I was married the first time, oh my God, 25 years ago, that was where I got a lot of my prospects, was of course somebody that bought a car, but we were always walking
prospects.
We were always walking the line of, if it doesn't work out, I don't want to get a bad survey. Luckily, it never got, it never had an ugly situation. I married one of them, a customer once also, but met Max's mom. But, it's funny because, we had a outwardly gay employee that so we won't mention the store, that used to let us know that sexual harassment would never be reported, but only rated.
He would say that to me when I would do sexual harassment training.
Oh, so you know who I'm talking about. Okay. And
absolutely.
And one of the most hurtful things he ever said to me is he says, "Jeff, your wife is so cute. That is the only female that I would ever think of being with." And I said, "Well, that's terrific. What about me?" He goes, "Nah, you're not my type." I said, "So you'd switch before you'd be with me?" He goes, "Yes." I said, "Okay." So, that's really wounding. Do you mind sharing the story of the HR manager sexually harassing the HR department, please?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This was in a hospital. And this was in my early HR years, in my early HR career. So you figure probably 1999, one of those women in the HR department was me. So I was the trainer. What we were sharing about before is this department was 4 people. The HR director, this was a big private hospital in Costa Rica. The department had a payroll girl, receptionist, secretary, and myself. And I was the trainer, the development person. And so we didn't know that he was being highly inappropriate with each of us because we wouldn't talk about it because this was the HR department. This was the HR director. And I always knew that I could hold my own, so I could just kind of handle things. What I was sharing before was the secretary would send her in the file room, which was a separate room that would lock to protect everybody's all employee files. And he would send her in there, and then he would follow her, and he would close the door behind him, and he would literally leave her in there, like lock her. And she was petrified. He would corner her, touch her, and he would tell her that nobody would believe her. And she did. She had crazy anxiety over it. She developed stomach issues, ulcers and stuff. And then, meanwhile, he was sending me very inappropriate emails, pictures, and, and I'm like, how are, this guy's literally using company email to send me this kind of stuff, that stays there. So I ignored him for the most part.
Being inappropriate is one thing, being dumb on top of it all.
dumb, completely dumb. I remember it was my birthday once. He sent me these flowers and these roses came to my office and he said, I want you so bad if you would just go out with me. And I was like, holy cow. And next thing you know, his wife walks in the office to go see him. And she's like, oh my God, those roses are beautiful. Who are they from? And I said, some idiot out there. And I said it really loud so he could hear. So he was just annoying to where I was like, okay, this is enough. Now, she came forward. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She was missing work. She didn't want to see him. And so when she said something, we all got together and we were like, wait a minute, like this is happening to you. He was just trying different things with everybody to see, I guess, where he would, how far he would go. But
since he was doing it with all these people, I mean, not to take any compliments away from you that you didn't deserve the flirting from the married guy. But is this like a validation thing when it's kind of going on with everybody?
I think a lot of times, like that's a whole other podcast that I can go on forever. But I do feel like sometimes there's some kind of brokenness in there that makes you need, I guess it's that validation or, knowing that you can, you got it. If you want it, you got it. Or I don't know. That in that case, he was very intimidating. He was trying to intimidate a lot. So,
well, and that's not validation. I mean, if it's through intimidation, that's not like right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a different right.
Yeah, it's a different thing. And I think that was it was interesting, but he denied it. He was like, I mean, he couldn't deny copies of emails. I think that was the tough part, because he couldn't, he denied the girl in the file room, which was terrible because I feel like her situation was the worst of all. But I had emails. So, it was, maybe it was meant to be that way so that he could get terminated because he really messed with her. It was really bad.
Well, I mean, I couldn't even imagine. And, look, I have two sons, 18 and 21. And, I mean, I'll just say it. There's a double standard. I have a daughter now. I have a 9-month-old daughter. And when I hear your story now, it hits me a whole different way. If it was her at work, feeling sick about going to work, etc.
There is a double standard for sure. And, I don't blame, I mean, at least in my culture, it's very traditional. And I remember that when I told my dad what was happening, I was already 20, 21. I remember when I told him and I said, this guy is really in trouble because I printed all these emails. And the first thing that he asked me was, well, did you do anything to lead him on? That was his question. Almost like, did you look for it? And I was like, no. And even if, you know what I'm saying? Like, no. And why would my dad ask that? And I think as a guy, he was more like, my dad's a retired doctor, love him. He loves me, but it's that culture. It's that culture of like, you had a man fired, you had your boss fired. Are you sure you didn't do anything to provoke this? So it's kind of interesting,
Well, I mean, on one hand, that could be disappointing, like, for my dad even to ask that question. But at the same time, when my sons come to me or my wife comes to me with an issue with somebody else, I ask them where they stand in the equation to make sure they're not just the hero in their own story, which people can do.
Absolutely.
They're capable of that, right?
Absolutely. That is true.
So it could have just been, hey, were you flirtatious and then you weren't interested anymore or not? Maybe just trying to raise you, just trying to have you check in with yourself on that. That may not have been.
That's probably what he meant. Were you like.
As a father, I could see doing that. And that doesn't mean that I don't believe in my daughter, but at the same time, where are you in this potentially?
Yeah. And once I told him, and showed him the messages, he's like, oh yeah.
Is it okay for you to tell about this service advisor that brought the person from the other?
That was a crazy story. And it was like one of those where we didn't know until the very end. So it just unfolded right before our eyes and we were all blindsided. So this was a service advisor great guy. Everybody liked him. And he was also like, he never seemed like the kind of person that would have like a double life. He was always so proper and so, like by the book. And he brought an employee, a service advisor, and he said he knew her from another dealership. And he had worked with her before, recommended her. She was qualified. She was great. So we brought her on board. Things were going great for several months. I want to say maybe around 5-6 months, everything was going fine, uneventful. And next thing you know, he announces that he's married. He got married. We didn't even know. I mean, we knew he had a girlfriend. We didn't know he was engaged. He just quietly went off and got married. So very, very shortly after that is when everything started to happen. What happened after that was the service advisor girl, accused him of sexual harassment. She said he had been harassing her for months and months and months, that they actually had a relationship, that they had dated while they worked at the other place, and that they had been engaged too, and that he broke it off, but that he promised her that he would bring her to work wherever it was that he came next, because he was going to take care of her. So we never knew if they actually, they kept seeing each other, but when he got married, she was enraged. She just went crazy. She went into the company CRM. She found out his address because she didn't know where he lived. She went at night a couple of times, knocked on the door, wanted to talk to the wife. She went fatal attraction on this guy. And it was really ugly. And so what was terrible about it was that she also threw in a religion discrimination lawsuit along with that. She said she was Muslim and that she was made fun of, and she wasn't allowed her prayer time, and she wasn't allowed her private time for prayer. It just became very convoluted and very crazy. And we ended up having to settle. And it was a big settlement. Again, just to avoid the bad press and to make it go away. And it was very, very poor judgment on behalf of this guy. Like, why are you going to bring her and know that you're seeing her? You're about to get married and you must know that she is not going to be okay with this. And it went bad. And then very shortly after, he left. I think it was too much for him and he just left. It was ugly.
Well, look, I can understand why it's uncomfortable. Even if you skated by with your life and your boss didn't want to get rid of you, how could you feel comfortable that you're a solid person as a manager to your boss with that behind you? I can understand.
And that's what they thought of you before. They thought you were this solid guy, solid man, God-fearing person. And then all of a sudden, the company's having to pay, I want to say it was like 80 grand something to settle, and oh my gosh, that the owner was so mad. He was like, you're going to pay for all of this,
Well, if I knew it was worth 80 grand, unfortunately, my boss at my current job at Car Chat 24 could be watching this, but I might become a Muslim woman and just take the shot.
Well, it's like what you were talking about during our warm-up. This woman that has managed to file claim after claim everywhere she works.
Like 5 jobs, sexual harassment claim in a row. I can't believe, I guess there's not a credit bureau for people that have filed lawsuits, but I just can't believe that someone could keep getting a job. But I suppose now the way job recommendations or references are, all they can say is the dates. Well, I guess you could ask, would you hire them again? What can they ask now?
So when someone calls you, all you really are allowed to say is days of employment, job title, and you are allowed to say if they're eligible for rehire or not. And if you say no, they're not, they really won't tell you anything. I wouldn't tell you anything because I don't want anybody coming after me saying, why did you share that information?
She's got 5 jobs in a row, though, that no, not eligible, no, not eligible.
Oh, yeah. But you wonder if people actually check for references. A lot of times they don't even check, and especially now in the car business, when you think about it. I mean, I don't know what her position was, and if it was even in the car business, but you're so hurting for the warm bodies. I mean, I had a dealer that was like, if he fogs a mirror, he can work, and we'll figure out. They'll learn, they'll learn on the go. So, and a lot of times they don't care. They just bring in whoever. But it is a little bit concerning with her case.
Well, I can identify both with the dealer saying if they're a warm body, hire them. Like in my current business, I need good staff like anybody needs good staff. I've actually, I don't know if you have any stories about this, but I can tell you that I've had prospective hirees let us know that they only needed us to report so that they could get the unemployment.
Oh my gosh.
That they didn't want the job. This has been in the last couple of months.
Oh my goodness. What kind of positions are you hiring for?
This is for telephone sales, B2B. Well, we're calling into car, boat, and RV dealers selling our software and consulting.
That's insane. So I have not heard of that, which, I mean, that's pretty ballsy. I have not heard of that. I have heard of people actually reporting an employer as being their employer. They just go and get the information, whatever, my friend, Morris Tree Service. This is the address. This is the phone number. I worked there from this date to this date and I made $50,000, and it's all fake. So if the employer is not logging in to the reemployment, website, then the file, it just gets passed. Like nobody appeals it. Nobody says, no, he didn't work for me. And this happens now. It's happened a lot. So you have to go back in there and say, nope, never worked for me, never employed, and try to cancel them because they're getting unemployment just pretending to have worked somewhere there, where they didn't.
Well, I mean, I can understand if they're a warm body and fogging a mirror because we need people. I think a lot of people need people. But at the same time, we are still very serious about the background check and criminal and checking references because it's so, as you know, it's so not worth getting the wrong person in and investing training and what they could do to the culture and, God forbid, hurt somebody, right? I actually have a story from a dealership where we hired somebody. So I can tell that we, at our place that we both had worked at one time, separate times, we were apparently not checking references, but this person, Land Rover salesperson, said that they worked at a Land Rover dealer in another state. So we hire him. He ends up in our pre-owned car department, does a terrific job. Customers are very loyal. And the general manager at the time goes to a dealer 20 group meeting and runs into the Land Rover dealer that this person used to work for and says, just wanted to let you know that we hired so-and-so and he's doing a great job for us. And they never heard of him. What was interesting, though, and I love the guy, so I don't want to let too much of the cat out of the bag and get him identified. But what was interesting is that he was in the middle of a drug trial, and he'd left that state because of that, and his parents both worked in that smallish town, and he didn't want to embarrass them anymore, and moved down, and, et cetera. And he ended up leaving us to go to federal prison. By now, we love him, and he's doing a great job, and his customers love him, and we know that he's going to jail, and we take him to the Tampa City Club up in a high-rise and throw a going-away party for him, including the carton of cigarettes, the file, and the cake, the whole deal. But what was really interesting is he had built such a rapport with his customers that he'd gotten a relationship with one of the other salespeople who, for every one of his customers that was sold while he was away at federal for 18 to 24, that he would send the money to this guy's parents. And They told the customers that he was going to jail or in jail, and many of them waited for him. First of all, they dealt with salesperson number 2 saying, as long as you're sending the money to him, I'll buy, or his family, I'll buy. And some said, when's he out? I'll wait. So he was lovable, just a little bit of personal use, a couple thousand pounds of marijuana while in college.
That's crazy. So I hear your drug story and I race you.
Oh, okay, here we go. Off the
this
script.
One is
I love
off the
it.
Script.
Look how terrible it's going to be on our second recorded. Go ahead.
I race you this one. Listen to this. So by now I am dating my now husband, who was the pre-delivery manager, right? So they took care of all the same place that we're talking about. They are in charge of the entire detail department, obviously, as well. And he hires this person. I was already living with him. And he tells me, did you run this guy's background? I said, yeah, I ran him clean as a whistle. Everything's fine. And he says, can you run him again? Because there's something off about him and I don't know what it is, but I'm not sure. And I said, I don't know I can't run the same report again. It's going to come back clean. Social security number is clean. Background check is clean. Driver's license, all the records, everything's clean. This guy's good to go. So here he comes, this guy, bodybuilder, he was in the detail department, shirt off all the time. All the sales girls would go back there to see him and they were fascinated with that guy. He was going to some Christian church right around the block where this place was. And he's, trying to get people to come to his church and praise God and all these, things. And my husband's like, there's something that is just off, So very long story short, this guy is now sitting on death row. I think he's still sitting on death row.
Oh my God. Death row?
Murder of a couple that, now he said he was also a personal trainer, but this couple, they were his clients for the personal training, but they were also clients of this dealership. And so when the police came over to interview my husband's now in law enforcement. He's now a police officer. But back then, when the police came over to interview him, they brought the company T-shirt, all filled with blood, which is what they had found. So he had, he killed them, trying to steal their safe. It was on the news, big, huge deal. And the guy passed all my screenings because he actually had another social security number. He had 3-4 different names, full names. He had 2 different social security numbers. So he was using obviously the good one. And we just never knew. We never knew, but he was, he killed them both in their home and he tried to steal their safe.
Now, when your husband was pre-delivery director, were you dating him or was he your husband by then?
I was dating him.
Okay. So it's your boyfriend that you're living with, fiance, whatever that you're living with. Okay. He's your HR and he's, running, getting the cars ready. And he has a feeling and he says, would you run it again? But up to this point, to your knowledge, I mean, even though he had a separate social security number, did he already do something like murder?
No, he hadn't done it yet.
Okay. So your husband just had a good intuition about it. There was nothing to your knowledge.
Nothing.
Other than unpaid parking tickets or something.
He had nothing. He had nothing in his record. My husband just couldn't put his finger on it. He was like, there's something about this guy that I do not like. There is something off.
And it makes sense why your husband became a cop. I mean, obviously he's got a little bit of this feeling anyway, right?
Yeah, he's a little detective. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, because I'm like the worst. I mean, I don't notice anything about anybody ever. So that's why I never like to be the one to interview anyone, because if they can make a little small talk and we know maybe one of the same people or places, I want to hire them. So later, when your husband is now fully a police officer or law enforcement, then it's like, remember that guy. That's how it went?
Oh, that's how it went. Do you also remember, people are going to be like, don't let her run any background checks. Do you remember there was a case of a gentleman in Brandon that won the lottery? The lady that was taking care of him, he ended up missing, and then they found him. He was buried under a concrete slab in his own house. Do you remember that case?
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Oh, well, I hired her too.
The one who buried him under the cement?
Dee Dee Moore.
My kind of girl. No, I don't.
I remember her, now this happened years and years before, I hired her years before this happened. But when I saw the news way after, this was in a place for developmental disabilities. And I hired her as almost like a CNA, like just assistant for the disabled individuals in the place. The sweetest girl, like she was so sweet. Everything was fine with her. And she worked there for a couple of years and then she left, and then I left too. I went in the car business and years went by. I want to say maybe, 8 years maybe. And then I see on the news that they find this man's body and that the person responsible is his caretaker, and her name is Dee Dee Moore. And I'm like, oh my God, I know that name. And then I realized that I had hired her previously. So, clearly.
So folks, if you're going to use Lighthouse HR, let's just be clear. So how about like a costly or an expensive, like a juicy settlement? Do you have any of those?
Yes. Yeah, I had one. This one was very ugly. It was pervasive in that it wouldn't go away. This one was a case of a gentleman that was Middle Eastern, and he was Middle Eastern American though. He was from up north, and he was just, he was classy. He dressed great. He was just, he was a great salesperson as well. And I would want to say that just because of the way that he looked, his features that were so Middle Eastern, he started getting a lot of crap from his coworkers. And he was also Muslim, and so they would just mess with him a lot. Just distasteful stuff, leaving bacon on his desk. I mean, just whatever you can imagine. It started as a joke, but then he was like, this is not funny anymore. And he started getting very aggravated with it. And when he brought it up to his manager was like, just get over it. The guys are just wanting to have fun with you. They're trying to bond with you, which is the wrong answer. And so things started getting hostile, and, he had to start standing up for himself. After bringing it up to the manager, he brought it up to HR. And so, HR is like documenting, talking to the manager. What are you doing about this? Like, this is going to be a bad situation. And it became bad. Then there was, like the star performer in the department that was, he was a little bit of a bully in the making fun, in the, like shoulder bumping in the parking lot, like just going on and going on and going on. So very little independent situations. A lot of times what happens with harassment and hostility is that each individual incident, isolated, may not seem like a lot or may not seem like too bad or too serious. And that's when you hear back in those days, it was like, oh, you just gotta have thick skin. You just gotta have thick skin. Like, this is the car business. Get over it, but that's not the way it is now. And so, those little isolated incidents were probably not that big, but when you sit down and you see everything, because this guy was no dummy, he was documenting everything that was happening every single day, and so by the time he brings this complaint, it's like out of control because everybody knew about it. Everybody knew that he had been complaining, talking about it. Now he said he was stressed. He couldn't come to work. It was affecting his income. It was affecting his, ability to make money. And it was a big claim. And normally they're 5-figure claims. This one was 6. So it was ugly. It was really ugly.
Well, look, this is interesting because on one hand, and again, my point of reference is only car dealerships. That's really all I know. But, on one hand, I think the car business is very fraternal, that like a firehouse where everybody kind of spends most of their life in that place together. I relate it to I've never been a fireman, but they do their multiple day shifts and cook together and live together and eat, and that really is, how the car business can be. I don't believe in bullying. I don't believe in taking it across the line. I mean, I've got a big sense of humor and I'm certain that I've crossed the line, but I also would just about want to kill myself if I found out that I really actually hurt somebody's feelings, and I'd apologize immediately. Especially when I was younger, I would have much more of an ability to just keep being a nutcase. But my intention, and you said something earlier about intention versus perception, my intention would be strictly to entertain, or strictly maybe even to entertain myself, but just have fun during the frickin' 10, 12, 14 hours that we're going to be there. If I ever even remotely heard or had a hint that it was hurting any feelings, I'd apologize, and that would be the end of it. But it's such a line to walk, because on one hand, there really is that fraternity, that barracks, and highly male. And then with the females, I don't need to make this sexist, but even with the females, and I don't mean through intimidation. I was in retail for 27 years. The females were very much one of the guys most often. And also in sales, there's a little bit of a ribbing because it is competitive. So it's not just like, I want to give this guy crap because it's Arabic. No, I don't believe in leaving the baking, continuing on after there's been an actual complaint. I mean, once there's been an actual complaint, you go to HR. How do I handle it? Do I have a meeting? Do I need to keep it quiet just between them? What's the right way to address it? But to me, it's so difficult to walk the line between technically being detailed to have a case versus just trying to keep everything going in the slightly dysfunctional family that we're always going to be when there's people involved. I don't know if I worded that whole thing right, but that...
You did.
Okay, that's a tough one.
It is very tough.
And it's all fun and games till someone gets fired, usually.
That's what I always say. It's all fun and games until it's not, and that's the thing. It's not your decision when it's not, unless someone says something that really at some point just makes you stop and go, whoa, that was not okay. I'm not okay with that. So it is very difficult. And, I know those people in the car business that are the lighthearted people that you're talking about, the people that just want to make everybody laugh, that want to make themselves laugh, that want to have a good time, and maybe sometimes say something off color, but it's not intended to anybody in particular. And it's not, it's not meant to be that, I am just trying to somehow sexually either intimidate you or make you feel a certain way. I mean, you can usually know that. Or you can tell, but still it shouldn't, you just never know. As different as people are nowadays with everything, you just don't know what you are going to do or what you're going to say that is going to set off somebody, and you have no idea. It's
a hard world to navigate because, like I said, as a father of a daughter now, or, understanding things about some ethnicities, like I have some ethnic backgrounds that are very easy to make fun of, that I make fun of myself and put it out there. So I've never felt entitled to ever get upset with someone if they're going to shtick me about it, if I'm already putting it out there about myself, right? So here's the tough part about it now. On one hand, one of the greatest things to joke about, one of the greatest things to build bridges with humor would be differences. So this could be male versus female, ethnicities, religions, whatever, as long as it's with sincere wanting to entertain. and fraternal. That's really the word. Brotherhood, sisterhood, this sort of thing. And being willing to take it and want to take it, and, in all of that business. But here we are now at a time when it could be a serious liability. But I don't want to make it just about the liability that could be a 5 or 6 figure check. On one hand, people are absolutely, in my opinion, way too hypersensitive about a lot of things. I think that. But at the same time, I also believe that people should be speaking up if they really got hurt or wounded, or the word you use, intimidated, like absolutely, 1,000%. So the tough part is it's very good that people are opening their mouth and saying something if they're being hurt. They should. But on the other side, I think it's harder to have fun in the world when there's this hyper concern. It's hard to be natural. So speaking of your HR stories, I was with Furman Organization for about 9 years, and they're like heavy compliance, because one of the Furman's son-in-laws is an attorney. Wonderful guy. Yeah, wonderful family. Really a wonderful family. The company that would come in and educate us, I forgot what we call it, but the HR training for the managers, told us a story that I've used many times to explain how anything your fault or not, like you said, it's good until it's not good. And this was the story of the female that worked in the dry cleaner that became a stripper on the side at night and invited everyone from work to come see her dance or whatever, I don't know if it was bikini or nude, whatever it was. And then filed a harassment lawsuit at the dry cleaner because the guys were talking about it at work. And I think won. I think. So I don't remember if the moral of the story was, and I have the book, it's called Car Law. It's like the guy who wrote it is like this thick. I don't know if you know the book, but it's obviously a crazy world out there. No doubt about it.
It is, and it shouldn't. So there is and this is in the car business. I got the phone call, I think it was last year. They were panicking because they just discovered that one of the sales guys worked the day shift at the dealership, and then he was a drag queen at night. And so, when they found out, now this person didn't invite any of his friends over to a show or any of that, but someone found out and they were really, really giving him a hard time. And so he was not happy about that. But, again, it's one of those things where you just, what you do outside of your work hours is yours, whatever it is. Now, if you're inviting your work buddies over and then you're filing a complaint because they're talking about you at work, I see everything wrong with that.
And thinking back to when I said I'd get in trouble X times a month, it wasn't all hostile environment issues or anything like that. It was just being a stupid young manager or a young employee. For example, I'm a young manager at that prior dealership where I had the 2 filing cabinets, and we have the factory come in to give us some award. So some big dinner and some whatever, because we accomplished something. And I used to do little magic tricks. I used to always carry magic tricks on me to entertain people in the showroom or their little kids, or keep somebody else's customer entertained for 5 minutes while they were waiting to go in the finance office. I always had one in my pocket, or a couple things in my pocket. So I was kind of known for that at the time. And we go to this dinner. We're at Bel Air Country Club. The management team, the owners, and these factory executives from Detroit are there. So my owner's son, who I still talk to, I can say the name, the Carlisle family, if you remember that name. Okay, so I'm just the frickin' best family of all time, and just God, love them to death. So Steve could see this, and it's all right if he hears it. So I'm sitting next to Steve Carlisle. He's talking to one of the factory execs whose name escapes me, but big brass. And everyone says, Jeff, do a magic trick. So I had one where I could put a cigarette out in something and not leave a hole and all that business. So I asked for the jacket of one of these executive VPs or whatever from Detroit. And I go to the front of the room and I show it and turn it around, and there's no holes in it. And then I take someone's cigarette, which back then everybody had a cigarette. And take his jacket, shove it into my hand, take the cigarette, put it out in there, smoke's coming out, and then show the jacket and there's no hole in it, and he's all freaked out, and I give it back. Now, he'd been talking to Steve Carlisle for like an hour about some, new brand Hyundai, some Hyundai dealer in Plano, Texas. I'll never forget that part. And when I sat down, he says, I didn't find that very entertaining. And I said, well, listening to the story about the Hyundai dealer in Plano for the last hour was riveting. I used to get in trouble for things like I just couldn't. That was,
Yeah. Like the filter.
Thank you. Yeah. Marcia, thank you so much for joining the Jeff Stearns Connected Through Cars show. I'm really excited. And remember, you're our inaugural female. So I'm very excited when we're in our second decade and people have been watching these, they'll say Marcia was always the first female. And your stories were terrific. And I really appreciate you making the time to come on the show with us today.
I'm so thankful that you had me, and this was a lot of fun, and thank you. I love it.
This has been Jeff Stearns Connected Through Cars.